Well, fantastic to see so many people. Good evening to you all. Welcome to the Royal Gallery. You will have noticed, obviously, that we've changed the venue for this event, expanded capacity, and that's entirely down to the vast popularity of our speaker tonight, Sir David Attenborough, who is very, very welcome here in the House of Lords. We started this series of Lord Speakers' lectures soon after I went on to the Woolsack in 2016, and in the time since we've had a very distinguished set of speakers, many of them drawn from the House of Lords itself. Martin Rees, the Astronomer Royal, Jack McConnell, former Minister, First Minister of Scotland, Tony Hall, the Director General of the BBC, and just retiring, if I may say so, after a very successful period in office. As for the future, we are lucky to have already several speakers lined up for this year. For the next lecture, we will hear from Deborah Bull, who I believe is here this evening, a much acclaimed dancer and former creative director of the Royal Opera House, speaking on the role of arts and creative industries. In March, we will hear from Mark Carney, Governor of the Bank of England, speaking to us only days before he steps down as Governor. And later in this year, we will be hearing from Martha Lane Fox, internet giant and businesswoman, and Aurelia Young, who will offer personal insights into her father, the sculptor Oscar Niemon, whose bust of Her Majesty the Queen is in the robing room. And tonight, we are kicking off the 2020 series with this very special event indeed with Sir David Attenborough. Sir David began his career in broadcasting career in 1952 at the BBC. Long and loyal service indeed. But I must admit that I have one extra reason for inviting him here tonight. Every so often there are calls that there should be an inflexible retirement age for the House of Lords. My view has always been the test is the contribution you make, not the age that you have reached. And Sir David is a one-man argument for my case. In his career, he has written, produced, hosted, and narrated countless award-winning documentaries, and his ability to make the natural world accessible and available to millions of people in their homes has allowed us to experience our planet in a way that we've never experienced before. His work is the standard on which nature and wildlife filmmaking is held against. Joining Sir David on the platform, two leading crossbench peers, Baroness Bryony Worthington, the lead author in the team which drafted the United Kingdom's Climate Change Act of 2008, and then my friend, the former Lord Speaker, Baroness Hayman, who had to fight those early battles on getting the speakership accepted. Thank you for both of you for taking part in this event this evening. I should mention that the format for this evening is slightly different than usual. We'll be having an in-conversation with style discussion, followed by 30 minutes of question and answer, which will be subject to the normal Chatham House rules. Helena Hayman has kindly agreed to facilitate those questions. Might I ask that before you speak, you say who you are and where you are from? And one other housekeeping point. I've been asked to say by she who must be obeyed, that's Black Rod, that there should be no photography or filming this evening. So, ladies and gentlemen, on to Sir David. I recall a powerful quote of his from the Blue Planet series. He said, "We are at a unique stage in our history. Never before have we had such an awareness of what we are doing to the planet, and never before have we had the power to do something about that. Surely we all have a responsibility to care for our blue planet. The future of humanity, and indeed all life on earth, now depends on us. It is with very great pleasure and great honour that I now hand over to Sir David Attenborough to deliver tonight's Lord Speaker's lecture, Hopes and Fears for the Planet.
First, may I say thank you profoundly to the House of Lords and to those who have arranged this evening. I do powerfully believe that we are at a very, very important history, not just of this institution, not just of this country, but our planet. That this House should have chosen to set up a special organisation to consider, for peers to consider the planet, is a very important move. The House of Lords is the distillation of the wisdom of this country, and the wisdom and know how to act. So to be invited by them to come and address you is a great privilege. I suggested that I wouldn't just pontificate, but that I would prefer there to be questions. So may I do just that?
Absolutely. And would you like to sit down and be comfortable in doing it? Well, can I just say thank you to the Lord Speaker and everyone. Can someone turn my microphone on? Is that possible? Or shall I just project? Maybe I'll stand up. To start off, and we'll have to do a little choreography between ourselves if Brian's microphone isn't working either. I was saying thank you to the Lord Speaker and all the staff of the House who've been involved in today's event, and for letting us have this sort of format. It's a huge privilege, and I think I speak for Brian as well as myself, to have the opportunity to ask Sir David some questions. And I wanted to pick up on what's already been said to start us off about whether we are actually at a tipping point. And my question is really a tipping point in two senses. Are we in a tipping point, as the Prince of Wales has suggested today, of kicking off a decade of action that will make a huge difference? Or are we just at a tipping point of things getting inexorably worse? Because we've had a lot of optimism and false starts in the past. So your views on that would be very welcome.
Tipping points. Is it?
Microphone not
working? It is working. You wish me to move there. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Good. Tipping point is a technical term. What it means is that you proceed by certain changes fairly evenly, of fairly regular seriousness, until suddenly you come to one more small change, and then there is a major catastrophe. An example of that is the falling of temperature, or the warming of temperature, that a moment comes when suddenly a glacier, which for years has been just melting a certain amount and increasing a certain amount, suddenly the temperature rises, and the rise is sufficient to cause water, ice, to turn to water. And suddenly the glacier is destroyed. Suddenly the glacier melts. And that can cause a whole chain of reactions, including what happens to ocean currents, including to rise of the ocean's levels and so on. That is a tipping point. Whether we are now at a tipping point globally is a question for debate, but it doesn't change the seriousness of the situation. We can't be foolish enough to say, let's go on producing incremental changes until we are just close to a tipping point, and then we've got to stop. We don't know where those tipping points are as far as global issues, many global issues, are concerned. We cannot afford to say we are waiting for a tipping point. We have to act now. The writing has been on the wall for 50 years, to my knowledge. 50 years ago, I was saying there are these dangers, and nobody took any notice. Suddenly, to my amazement, but suddenly, after 50 years or so of talking about it, suddenly there has been a change in opinion. And suddenly there is a great surge worldwide to recognize the problems that we face and a determination to do something about it. So as far as I'm concerned, whether it is a tipping point or not a tipping point, now is the time we have to act. We cannot delay anymore. And fortunately, it seems to me that worldwide there has been a huge recognition of this. What has brought it about, I don't know. But let me suggest that there was a time in the middle of the 19th century when perfectly civilized people in this country and elsewhere thought it was acceptable, if not moral, that you could own another human being as your servant, as your slave. And within 25 years, it became intolerable to hold that opinion. And the same thing, I believe, has happened about our views on what we are doing to the planet. 25 years ago, people said, oh, well, a few naturalists are concerned, but we needn't change the way we live. Suddenly, now, everybody recognizes that they have a responsibility to the future represented by young people, to the people such as Greta Thunberg, who has done wonders, in my view, in bringing public attention to what is going on. So if there is a tipping point, Greta Thunberg has actually one who has triggered it. And I, for one, am very grateful to her. Thank you.
Thank you, Sir David. And I think I do actually agree with you that there's a much greater awareness now of the issues, but I think there are still huge challenges. And I wondered if you cared to comment on the recent tragic events in Australia, where we've seen over 500 million species of animals and birds lost to the wildfires that are still ongoing. And yet there still seems to be quite a block in terms of accepting that this is a climate change-related impact, and more importantly, Australia taking action to reduce its export of the fossil fuels that we know are contributing hugely to the problems we see today.
Australia has a very big problem, the politicians in Australia, politicians who have the responsibility for balancing the budget. And a major element of Australia's income comes from coal deposits, which are sold to China and elsewhere. To suddenly decide that you will not turn those into dollars is a hard decision to make if you also have to balance budgets. And before the rest of us speak too easily and scornfully of the politicians in Australia who have accepted that they will balance their budget by exploiting coal, which they have in abundance, we have to recognize that they have responsibilities towards the economic situation. But it is my belief that the costs of increasing temperatures far, far outweigh what it costs what the Australians may earn by exploiting coal. I shouldn't really be speaking about this because I'm not a citizen of Australia and I don't have particular insight into the facts. But the fact remains that the temperature of the world, the climate, has warmed beyond expectations, except for those who perhaps have been looking at the situation with greater care than many. And there is no question that poor Australia is on fire, or has been on fire at any rate. What a catastrophe. And it's not just animals and plants. When you listen to people talking who have gone back to their homes, I put it to you, to go back to a suburb of London and find your house has been burnt to the ground with everything in it is an enormous cost, economically and in human terms. So big disaster in Australia. Whether it will whether it's irrecoverable, whether they will be able to get over this problem in ecological terms, I'm not sure. The fact is that Australian ecosystems are closely tied to fire. Many of the eucalyptus forests are such that they can withstand passing fire through, not only to withstand it, but actually to rely upon it. There are plants in Australia that have evolved to produce seeds which do not germinate until they have been swiftly burnt. And there are good ecological reasons for that, and it's a system which is well recognized. But for vast areas to be burnt is a different question. Animals in Australian fires are able, in previous seasons, to be able to retreat, to migrate. There will be a loss of life, but there won't be extinction. Just how easy there have been refuges in which Australian animals and plants can survive and get renewed strength to repopulate a burnt area, we will have to find out. But my sympathy goes out to the many friends I have in Australia. Just think of going home tomorrow night and finding that your home is in ashes. We have to be very sympathetic for our Australian friends.
I'll try this once more. Working? Yep, brilliant. So can I ask you about leadership? Because you've been a great leader in this campaign. And the UK sees itself as leading. But often when one talks to policymakers or to individuals, they say, listen, we do all this, but actually we make a tiny contribution to the global problem. And there are emitters out there, there are countries, whether it's China or the United States or India, who far outweigh us. So why are we doing what we're doing? And I wondered if you'd like to comment on the sort of leadership we can give in terms of innovation and quality rather than necessarily tons of carbon taken out of the atmosphere.
We live in unique times. Up to 50 years ago, nations talked to themselves and didn't pay much attention to other nations. It's often said that there was a meeting point, a tipping point, if you like, when the astronauts showed us that little blue planet, and we suddenly realized that we all lived on the same planet. It was small and finite in the black infinity of the universe. Everybody alive and ever has been alive lived on that little blue spot. And it did change human attitudes, I'm sure. And now, for the first time, all of us, whether we're here or whether we're in Sydney, whether we're in Beijing or whether we are in Buenos Aires, can see the same pictures. And we are able to show people worldwide what is happening in different parts of the world. So if we actually take action on certain things, people all over the world will know that we've taken action. And we can show that our experience is important, that decisions you take about how you look after the environment are crucial domestically, but also universally. There has been nothing to compare with the COP series that the United Nations has organized, in which nations from all over the world have got together to talk about something on the environment. 5 years ago, it was in Paris. It's coming up now in this country, in Glasgow, later on this year. And it could be crucial to the future of mankind that the decisions were taken in Paris 5 years ago are now given the armament of decisions by nations worldwide to really do what they know how to do in terms of dealing with rising temperatures. My hope is that the mere fact that we now recognize universally, we now see the same pictures. We now see, all of us know what is happening in the Amazon now. All of us know what we're doing to the seas now. And that will bring, I hope, a universal conscience, a universal determination that the time for talk has come to an end. I truly believe that Glasgow has the capacity, the possibility of becoming a hinge in the health of this planet. And those politicians who are going there from all over the world, I hope and pray that they get together and put teeth into the determination which was first articulated 5 years ago in Paris, and they now give economic teeth and a determination worldwide to do something about it. This Glasgow meeting will be seen by future generations as a time when we did or we did not understand the dangers and possibilities of our own actions. Let's hope wisdom prevails.
So, David, one of the arguments that we've often used when calling for greater action in the UK has been that it's a case of moral leadership, in the sense we were the home of the Industrial Revolution that started off so many of the impacts we're seeing today. And so we have a moral duty to lead by example. And I wonder if in this year, this important 2020 year, if you could perhaps give us some thoughts as parliamentarians as to what we might want to focus on that we could deliver domestically that would send a signal internationally that we are continuing in that leadership.
I don't know how you do that. This House knows how it can be done. And I can only say that I believe now that there is a important and significant section of the British public, heavily weighted perhaps with younger people, who will demand that this institution takes the actions which everybody is recognizing has to be done. And that we may point the way. And so we aren't just talking theory. We are prepared to take action. And that others will be encouraged to do so.
So David, one of the issues that was very starkly illustrated in Davos this week was the issue of complacency and denial and the categorization of people who see the problem as doom-mongerers, and also the anger and frustration and despair of young people not feeling that enough has been done. You're a great communicator. How do we get that balance right of making people both aware of the gravity and the urgency, but not so desperate at the danger that they become impotent or feel that it's not worth trying?
Well, I think you touch on something very important here. If there's one thing that people don't understand, it is what is happening, what politicians are doing in the various countries to take positive action about this. Advances are being made. Groups are getting together. We are taking steps. But as I understand it, or at least as I perceive it, it is surprisingly how few people know what COP is. How people know that politicians, all party politicians in this House, are taking notice of what's happening. The idea, people say, why don't you do something? Doing something is a very difficult thing in a democratic society. And you have to put strength behind it. But please, can government institutions find a way of telling people what could be done and what steps have been taken to bring it about? People always say, oh, it's just a talking shop. It has to be in a democratic society. It has to start as a talking shop. But it mustn't end as a talking shop. There has to be some section of the administration which goes out of its way to demonstrate what is being done. And that's not easy without sounding as though you're trying to clap yourself on the back. But it has to be done. We have to know at the end of COP, this next COP, in Glasgow. What is being done? And I believe that there are actually many people going around now. For example, I know, I don't think it's a secret, that the Science Museum next big exhibition will be what is being done, what can be done, and what's in hand at the moment to deal with problems of the climate. We need more of that. And if there are possible ways in which we can involve people, not just with sorting out your waste and putting the plastic in one bin and paper in another, more than that, give us a chance to do things, but also tell us what is being done. And I think that may sound, maybe the people concerned are wishing to say, well, we don't want to appear to be clapping ourselves on the back. It's not just patting on ourselves on the back. People have to believe that there is a way and that there are people working in that way.
Thank you so much. You touched on this earlier about how technology has now enabled pictures to travel around the world very quickly. And we have almost godlike technology now. I think it was E.O. Wilson who said the real problem with humanity is we have Paleolithic emotions, medieval institutions, and godlike technology, referring to how we can have a huge impact now on ecosystems. But in a sense, we have this godlike technology now that enables us to see the world and communicate at a global level far more easily than was ever possible. So are there technologies, the advent of technologies, that give you hope that we're getting closer to being able to develop a global vision of what needs to be done and a global governance almost?
I think that people are, for the first time, and it isn't the first time, I mean, it's within the last 20 years, that anybody who was interested can find out what's happening in the rest of the world, and we have to facilitate that. We've never had this situation before, ever. People now know that actually there are small island countries in the Pacific that are drowning because of what we have done to the climate and the way in which the oceans are rising. People are losing their countries. That's very important. So we must do what we can. It's very, very important to spread the message, and I hope we are.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, very briefly, David, I think you will have judged from the response and from the reception just how much the audience here have appreciated your words. But as you said, it's not just words. Words are important because advocacy is crucial, because, frankly, the case has still to be won. But the real challenge for us, the challenge for governments and the challenge for politicians, is to support those efforts to change, but to press for the implementation of real change. And I think that was one of the messages that you put forward so clearly. So thank you, everyone. Thank you, Helene. Thank you, Bryony. Thank you, the audience, for your extremely good questions and points. But above all, David, thank you so much for what I regarded as a very important evening. It's been a genuine privilege and pleasure to host you here in the Royal Gallery. You've encouraged so many people here tonight, of all ages, from all sorts of parts of Westminster. And you have, I believe, also vastly encouraged the process of change. I can't resist saying this. One thing I hope above all, for all kinds of reasons, David, please don't retire. So many, many, many thanks again, I say to you, and I say to those in the audience, I hope that you will come and support some of our future events in 2020. Thank you so much for coming. Thank you so much for speaking.